Dear students, welcome back to this video. Now in this video, we are going to discuss about the very last performance appraisal technique, and that is behaviorally anchored rating scale. Again, behaviorally anchored rating scale. Now again, just as before, the details of the performance appraisal method is hidden in the name. So let's try to understand the naming of this method. So in this method, basically, we anchor or fix specific types of behaviors with specific ratings or numbers. So in general, all of us know that anchor is used by a ship to fix its place, right? So to stop its movement or to fix its place. So again, anchor is used to fix its position. So in the same manner, in behaviorally anchored rating scale, we anchor specific types of behavior with specific numbers. So simply speaking, if an employee behaves in a specific manner, we give that employee a specific number. Now I know, obviously many of you are still confused. Don't worry, this is the shorter definition. I'm going to give you an example and the detailed definition very soon. Just keep in mind that the main purpose here is to fix specific behaviors with specific numbers. So now let's start with the example first. Once you understand the example, the definition will be very easy for you to understand. So for this method, let's assume we are going to analyze the performance of a server in a restaurant. So we are going to analyze this person's performance. And in analyzing that performance, we are going to use the behaviorally anchored rating scale method. Now, in order to use this method, there are two steps. The first step starts at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of the performance appraisal period. So it takes place even before the employees start working for that specific year. And the second step or the last step takes place throughout the year or once the employees have started working for that year. Again, the first step takes place at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of the performance appraisal period. And once the first step is done, the second step takes place throughout the year when the employees are working. So let's start with the first process. The first task is for the HR manager to develop a scale like this at the beginning of the year. Again, to develop a scale like this at the beginning of the year. What is the purpose of the scale? On this scale, the HR manager is going to decide that for a specific type of behavior, the HR manager is going to give a specific certain number to an employee. Again, for a specific type of behavior, the HR manager is going to give a certain or a specific number to an employee. So for example, as an HR manager of a restaurant, what can be the best behavior expected from a server? Maybe this. So always serves on time and greets the customers with a big smile. So on this scale, if a server behaves in this manner, that server will be given a 5. So this is the decision of the HR manager. Again, this is the best behavior expected from a server. So if any server demonstrates this behavior, that person will be given a 5 out of 5. What can be the next best behavior? Here it is. So serves on time, but cannot handle customer complaints with a smiling face. So if a server demonstrates this type of behavior, then that person will be given a 4. Then moving on, what can be an example of the next best behavior? So here it is. Serves on time, however, takes wrong orders sometimes. So see, at each level, the level of service or the behavior is decreasing in terms of quality. So again, the HR manager has decided that yes, if any server demonstrates this behavior, then that person will be scored 3 out of 5. Then what can be the next type of behavior, which is worse than this? This one. Eat some of the food before serving. So again, if somebody is seen doing this, that person will be given a 2 out of 5. Now, can you guess what can be worse than this and deserves a 1 here? I don't know what, but this is the worst that I could think of. Picks his nose while serving. This is really gross. So if somebody demonstrates this behavior, that person will receive a 1. So yes, the scale is ready. Now this is called a behaviorally anchored rating scale. Why? Because we are fixing each type of behavior with a specific number. Again, we are fixing each type of behavior with a specific number. That's why it's called behaviorally anchored rating scale. Now this scale has to be developed at the beginning of the year, even before the restaurant server starts working for that year. Why? Because once this scale is developed, Now the HR manager will use this form or this scale to observe the work performance or the behavior of the restaurant server throughout the whole year. And based on the behavior, each server will be scored out of 5 here. So again, this rating scale has to be developed at the beginning of the performance appraisal period or at the beginning of the year. Now let's assume that this scale is ready and the restaurant servers have started working. Now let's assume that you are the HR manager, and with this form or this rating scale, you go into the restaurant to observe one of the employees' behavior. Now the moment you enter the dining hall, you say this. I'm really sorry for this picture. I'm really sorry. This is hypothetical. So when you say this, all right, what is the score that you are going to give to that person? Obviously 1. Why? Because in the rating scale, you decided that yes, if any server demonstrates this kind of behavior, that server will be scored 1 out of 5. So this is exactly how we develop a behaviorally anchored rating scale. So now let's move on to the formal definition here. Behaviorally anchored rating scale is an appraisal tool that uses a numerical rating scale with specified behavioral examples of good and poor performance. So this is the formal boarding definition, but I'm sure all of you know exactly what is meant by this boarding definition, because I have broken this definition to easier parts so that you can easily understand. And obviously then we have gone through the example as well. Now just to tell you, rather than saying this whole name of this appraisal method, we can use a short form here. What is that? BARS. B-A-R-S. So many people call it the BARS method. So now let's move on to another example. So here is a practical life BARS form. Now this real life practical BARS form is being used in a restaurant. So this one is also being used to do performance appraisal for a server in a restaurant. Now as you can see here, just as before, we have certain behaviors written here, and along with that we have specified scores over here. Now just to tell you, in the earlier example we had scores from 1 to 5, here we have scores from 1 to 7. So the scores can vary. I mean, the lowest score can be 1 and the highest score can be 7, or it can be 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. There is no limitation on that. But the main point is we have to have certain behaviors fixed with each of these scores. Now let's analyze this form a little bit. So let's take a look at the best expected behavior from a server in this restaurant. So could be expected to explain the items on the menu and offer recommendations based on customers' stated tastes. So if any server is found to demonstrate this behavior, that yes, they know the menu really well and they can explain and convince the customers to buy items on the menu, that is a really good behavior according to the restaurant. And by demonstrating this behavior, a server can achieve the highest score, which is 7. Now moving on to the next. Could be expected to say to customers, how is your day? And wish them a happy day when they leave the store. So if a server demonstrates this kind of behavior, in that case, that person will receive a 6. So in this manner, all the behaviors have a certain score allotted. Now let's directly move to the last behavior. Could be expected to yell obscenities at customers. So yes, very normally, if a server is seen to yell at customers, that is very rude, and that's why that person may receive a 1 here. Now along with these behaviors and scores, in this form we have something additional, but this is not mandatory. So according to this form, if somebody receives a 6 or 7, so those kinds of behaviors and scores exceeds acceptable level of performance. On the other hand, if somebody receives 3, 4 or 5, then their behavior is acceptable. And finally, if somebody receives 2 or 1, that means that person has failed to meet acceptable levels of performance. So that is poor performance. So yes, this is basically a BARS method or a behaviorally anchored rating scale method. So as I said just earlier, this is a 2-step method. So in the first step, at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of the performance appraisal period, an HR manager has to develop this scale. So the HR manager has to come up with these behaviors and these scores. And once this form or scale is developed, it will be used to rate the performance of the employees, which will ultimately help in the year-end performance appraisal process. Now for your better understanding, I have put another real-life example here. So this form applies to a salesman, and obviously it is constructed in the same manner. Now I'm not going to explain it here any further. If you want to have a look, please pause this video and you can read these behaviors and match them with these scores. So the basic principle is the same here. So yes, finally we are done with all the performance appraisal techniques. Congratulations. So in the next video, we are going to discuss a new and different topic in this chapter. See you very soon.